Welcome, listeners, to the Grande Bouffe, the big feast, with myself, Cole Smithey, and this week's special guest, British actor Chris Sherwood.
Hello.
Greetings. As always, we are here to copiously consume international politics and culture through the prism of a single film and a different craft beer. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, it's a nice surprise. I came away to New York not realising I was going to end up doing a podcast, so this is a first for me.
Fantastic. And of course, you've brought one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's certainly in my top 10 list and a lot of people's, The Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yes, The Rocky Horror Picture Show. Now the longest running film ever. So a significant film. It's 45 years since it was first performed on stage back in London. And it certainly means a lot to me, so it seemed like the obvious choice for me.
Terrific. Well, you came to me, you were referred to me by the Grande Bouffe regular, PHIL Holt.
Correct.
And so I want to hear about your connection with Phil. I know you're in a play that he's doing in London right now.
That's right. I met Philip Holt a couple of weeks ago back in London. I'd put myself forward to audition for a play called The PEREGRINE, which is taking place at the Stockwell Playhouse in London from the 27th of August. And the play is set in Argentina, and I thought, being a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, I wouldn't stand much of a chance, because we think of Argentinians as being dark and mysterious. I'm still quite mysterious, but I'm definitely not dark. But the play sounded so interesting and the character sounded so interesting, so I put myself forward for it anyway. And 2 auditions later, 2 hours of Tango class, which I'd never done before, later, I was told that I'd got the part. So that's how I met Philip. And since being in London, we met up again in Central Park on Saturday night for a free event. It happens every Saturday night in Central Park, and it's an Argentinian tango event. So we went and watched and soaked up the atmosphere, and I met this wonderful Russian lady who was resting her feet that night, but normally dances, and she knew everyone there. And so it's a great insight into the social politics of tango, and she was kind of pointing people out, saying, oh, he's a terrible dancer, I don't like to dance with him, he throws people around, this man's very good, he's very sensual and caring and generous and very subtle in his guidance, and this is a woman dancing on her own, and she says no one likes to dance with her because she always criticises people, and it was fascinating. And then we had a free lesson with a French tango instructor. So that was me and Philip on Saturday night.
So you do a little tango dancing in the play?
Yeah, I'm going to have to learn quite a routine for a sort of climactic scene in the play. That's something I'm quite nervous about, but I'm looking forward to the challenge. My character Paul is a political assassin, so he's dark and dangerous, and the play examines his past and his present and how the past comes back to haunt him, possibly. So yeah, really well-written, interesting play. And if anyone's in London, then I'd encourage them to come and watch.
That's terrific. It's the end of August, and where is it again?
It's the Stockwell Playhouse from the 27th of August until the 2nd of September, so just a 1-week run.
What's the address? Do you know the address by chance of the Stockwell Playhouse?
Not off the top of my head.
That's all right. People can Google it. The Stockwell Playhouse.
Stockwell Playhouse, yeah. The PEREGRINE by PHIL Holt.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. And you've brought a delightful craft beer for us to imbibe.
Yeah, TRAILBLAZER and New England style Indian IPA.
How did you find this beer?
Well, I went into a shop selling craft beers, and not knowing a great deal about craft beers, and particularly American craft beers, I just thought, I want to find something that has a visual link to or some creative link to the Rocky Horror Show. Now, this bright orange can has a man on a motorbike, which reminded me of Eddie.
Definitely.
And his entrance. And the word trailblazer, I mean, I think of Richard O'Brien, Dr. Frankenfurter as kind of trailblazers. So
absolutely.
It sort of made sense to me.
I like it. All right, let's have a little toast.
Yeah.
To the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
To the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That's pretty tasty.
Oh, yeah.
Very refreshing on this hot summer day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could do with some refreshment after roller skating here over Central Park.
That's what you were saying. You roller skated here from 62nd.
Yeah,
on the west side.
That's right. Yeah, that's where I'm staying at the moment, and I just love Central Park. I think it's far superior to any parks in London. So well designed. Every need is catered for.
It's a beautiful.
So I spend as much time there as I can.
Beautiful park. The most visited public park in the world, with 38 million visitors per year.
Wow, that's a good statistic. I didn't know that. But I'm not surprised. It's I mean, it helps that you only kind of have one big park in New York.
Yeah, and it's got the reservoir, which is our de facto lake in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
And it's also a quite popular spot for birds of all species to frolic. And they come through Central Park. There's a great documentary about it called Birders, the Central Park Effect, about all the different species of birds that visit the park.
Any peregrines?
It could be. I'll have to look that up. I'll have to look that up. I know that there's Baltimore Orioles and cardinals and things. I was walking through the park the other day, and I saw a beautiful cardinal, very red and noticeable, showing off its feathers.
I've seen some incredible birds in Central Park that I certainly don't see in Central London.
So let's dive into Rocky Horror, shall we?
Yeah, let's.
Great. All right, so we were talking just before we started recording. I was telling you about my experiences with Rocky Horror Picture Show, where I was living in Richmond, Virginia, going to high school. I was about 14. And two really good friends of mine, boyfriend and girlfriend, Jimmy and Ann, came over to my apartment late on a Friday night and were rifling through my cabinets, getting rice and newspapers and a deck of cards and a newspaper and all these things to take to this movie. And I had no idea what I was in for. And I think I ended up seeing it, I don't know, more than a dozen times after that. And I haven't seen it since until, of course, in preparation for the podcast. And seeing it again, I realized what a great, I mean, the production design is amazing. Of course, all the performances are just incredible. And the music is, it's perfect. It's just exquisite. It's a perfect musical, I think.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, I'd love to know your first impressions, because you went to see it at the cinema not knowing what you were in for. I mean...
well, you know, there's so much going on. It's hilarious. It's scary. It's surprising, and it's really fun. It's so much fun. That's what I think I took away from it, was how enjoyable it was, how vibrant it is. It really makes you feel alive. It's a great ride, this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. But my first experience of it was quite different. I was about 15 years old, and I was living in a small town where I grew up in the middle of England called Ashby-de-la-Zouch. And it was a very straight, white town in the middle of the countryside. And I was off school for a couple of weeks because I'd had an accident at the Boy Scouts and my ankle got crushed by a big metal container.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare.
Yuck.
And my best female friend, who lived just around the corner from me, came round one evening with a series of VHSs for me to watch, one of which was the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And she had been watching this since she was 6-7 years old and loved it. But she didn't tell me anything about it. And I'd heard of it, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but because of the name, just assumed that it was a horror film. And I was really in the mood for a good horror film. I wanted to be scared. And so I was sat there relieving myself from the daytime TV and put this VHS in and expecting this horror. And so it began, and it was not what I expected, and I really didn't like it. I was really, I found it really odd and weird, like nothing I'd seen before, and I didn't get to the end of the film. And I think that was just simply because there was a mismatch between what I was expecting and what I was what I saw.
Yeah.
And I just didn't get it. I was comparing it to horror films, I think.
Right.
And that was where I went wrong. And I thought, this isn't a very good horror film.
Do you remember where you stopped it?
Oh, it was after they'd got into the house, and I think it was after the time warp.
So pretty early in the
quite
in the story.
early. I just could not understand it. I thought, this is just too weird for me.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, a year or so later, we were coming up to the sixth form party. So the sixth form is what we refer to as the top 2 years of school. And every year we had this end of term party that was fancy dress, and there was never a theme. It was just, you could go as anything you like. And my girlfriend at the time, together with the girl who'd given me the Rocky Horror Show, dared me to go as Dr. Frankenfurt to the sixth form party. And I said, go on then, I'll do it. And I just had the most incredible night, dressed up in stockings and suspenders. It was completely liberating. And as a reward, these two girls for my birthday clubbed together and bought me tickets to see the stage musical.
Oh, wow.
And it was here where I really got it, and it hit home and made me realise that this was something magical and something bigger than what it originally set out to be. The sense of community, the liberal values it promoted. And so began my love affair with the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Were you acting yet by that time?
No, I wasn't. At that time, I was still in high school.
I see. When did you start acting?
Well, from a young age, I had an instinct for acting. At primary school, our classes had to do productions, and I enjoyed them, and I would often get the lead parts. At high school, I played Romeo in Romeo and Juliet, but this was a production that we had to do and everyone had to be involved in. When it came to making choices about acting or other things, I avoided acting largely because I didn't identify with the other people who were doing it. I didn't identify with the teachers who were doing it. The atmosphere in the drama department was very cliquey, and it just didn't appeal to me. And I had no aspirations.
I think all drama departments are so cliquey.
Yeah.
I studied acting at San Diego State, and that was the problem that I found myself in, the dilemma where it seemed like you really had to play a game that no one had given you the rules to.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw how damaging it was to some of my friends who did do it. So I avoided it, and I always had a great passion for sport, so I did PE instead and had a great time doing sport. Then at university, again, I was sport, but then a friend of mine was...
What kind of sport I'm curious.
My primary sports growing up were soccer and cricket. But I've always been a bit of a generalist, and I played a lot of basketball, and I played for a table tennis club. I roller skated a lot, skiing, surfing, and gymnastics, which I did very young and then picked up again when I went to university, and I represented the university in gymnastics.
Terrific.
So Rocky is an aspirational character for me in some respects.
You certainly have an athletic build.
Well, I do personal training to supplement my acting, because one can't expect to earn a reliable living doing acting, certainly not when you're starting out. And
you do have a bit of, if I may be so bold, of a Daniel Craig appearance.
Philip mentioned Daniel Craig in the auditions, actually, and it does come up quite a lot, the resemblance to Daniel Craig. So yeah, I'm hoping that one day there'll be a script where he has a brother and needs a brother, and I'd be just the man.
You certainly would. There's no question.
Yeah,
no question.
Yeah. So,
and I love Daniel Craig. He's a great actor, terrific actor.
I agree, and
very dynamic.
I wish I'd been there for his early stage career in London, because that was what really set him up to be a great actor. And we know him nowadays more for his film work, but certainly he's a very highly regarded stage actor as well.
Absolutely.
Indeed, he was in the original cast of Angels in America.
Right.
Playing the role that Russell Tovey recently did. That was your one chance to see Daniel Craig naked on stage.
There you go.
So yeah, he's a wonderful actor.
Terrific, yeah.
So when I was at university doing all this sport, a friend of mine was doing a production of Orpheus in the Underworld, and he was playing Morpheus, God of Sleep, which was a very fitting role for him. And he said that they're really struggling to fill the role of Bacchus, the god of wine. I think you could do it. So I thought, well, why the hell not? So I auditioned for it, and all I had to do in the audition was take my clothes off, because it's a non-speaking, non-singing part. So I took my clothes off and got the part. And that really sowed a seed for me the joy of working as part of a team, creating something, putting it on stage, having the immediate audience feedback. And the amazing thing for me was being surrounded by these incredible singers. And I loved the music in that show, Offenbach. So that will always be dear to me. I then got into the advertising industry. I was offered a job while I was still at university and moved to London to work in advertising. And that was when I fell in love with theatre. Growing up in a small town in the middle of England, there wasn't really any theatre to see. I went to the pantomime in Nottingham once a year, and that was it. So I moved to London working in advertising and just started going to see lots of theatre, and I really developed a love of it, particularly fringe theatre, and I saw all these stories that I related to and that moved me in ways that I hadn't moved me before. And I could see all these guys making careers out of acting, and a lot of them I thought weren't that good, and they're only doing it because they decided to do it. So that inspired me to decide to do it, and I did another year or so in advertising while I started doing amateur productions to get a sense of whether or not I had the aptitude or enjoyment for it. And it all felt right, so I left and went and studied at Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, and the rest is history.
Fantastic. So how many plays have you done since then? Do you have any idea?
Oh, I have no idea how many I've done. I would say 12 to 15.
Right.
In about 4 or 5 years. Yeah. So I've been very fortunate. I've been very busy. I've usually had something to look forward to. I haven't always been active in that moment, but there's always been something going on. And that sometimes has meant doing amateur plays and student films. But I always think the more you do, the more you get, and the better you get. And I enjoy acting for acting's sake, so I'm not precious about what I'm doing. And I was very fortunate, actually, to leave drama school to go straight into a play at one of my favourite theatres in London, at the Almeida, which is in Islington. It was a wonderful verbatim play about the 2011 riots that took place in London, and I was playing characters very different to myself, but yeah, an incredible experience. But of course I knew that it wasn't always going to be as good as that, and sure enough, the next play I did was nowhere near that level. So it's fun trying. I love what I do now.
Well, I'm curious about. I want you to talk more about Rocky Horror Picture Show. It started as a British play in the early 70s, and I know that Richard O'Brien, who wrote it, he was inspired by this very underseen little movie called Kiss Me Quick. Have you ever seen that? Do you know anything about that?
No. So
there's this little trashy, it's a softcore, porny movie called Kiss Me Quick. And wow. it's this, the conceit of the movie is that they're watching, it's a voyeuristic movie where the characters are watching other characters on a little screen. And I think that for me, in rewatching Rocky Horror, I realized that I think the linchpin of the movie has to do with Tim Curry's character, Frankenfurter, seducing both Brad and Janet in similar fashion. And we're watching it through this camera that's set.
Yeah, voyeuristically.
Yeah. And by these two bisexual characters, Magenta and
Riff Raff.
And Riff Raff and Little Nell's character. Does she have a name? What's her name in the movie?
Columbia.
Oh, Columbia, right? Magenta and Columbia, right? Terrific, yeah.
Yes,
they're so great. I love them so much.
Just perfect casting,
and their costumes are amazing.
Yeah, everything visually about that film is so perfect. Yeah, and I think really it has really contributed to its longevity.
And I also realized that it's really a precursor. The whole LGBT movement with the rainbow stuff is all intrinsically threaded through the movie.
Yeah,
When
when Rocky's creation, just before he's finally born, Tim Curry is pouring all the colours of the rainbow into the big tank.
Exactly.
Where Rocky is still bandaged up, and that's what brings him life.
And Columbia's costume has the rainbow design in it, and at the end we see a rainbow over the castle.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's all just woven so beautifully into the story.
And this is one of the reasons the film warrants repeat viewing, and there's so much depth to it visually. And the designer, an Australian guy called Brian Thompson, I think he's just done an incredible job in layering it. And there is so much symbolism in the film: religious symbolism, sexual symbolism. And I'm still discovering things every time I see it and watch it.
Oh, I love the opening where it's Riff and Magenta, and they're standing in the church. They're at the back of the church, and I don't know the name of the painting.
American Gothic.
I mean, is that it? With the he's got the pitchfork. He's holding the pitchfork, which at the end of the movie turns into a laser gun. Yes,
that's right.
Very clever stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are the only the things you spot when you've watched it.
When you've watched it, yes, many times.
But yeah, art is an interesting point, because the designer was saying that when he came over to work on it, it was the first time he'd ever been to Europe, and he went to Paris and was just in awe of all the incredible artwork that he saw. And so the art is something that is woven into it, and there are a number of pieces that, if you look closely, you can see. So there's American Gothic. You've got the Mona Lisa. The Last Supper is in there. American Gothic we've talked about. There are a number of sculptures, statues, Aphrodite of Menophantos, and the Whistler's mother, which they actually recreated with Meatloaf as the mother in a book behind the narrator.
The narrator, right.
Yeah. So
I think it's the best thing Meatloaf ever did, by the way. I mean, Bat Out of Hell is a great record and all, but he's so perfectly cast as this rock and roll bad boy who has a scar across his forehead because we find out that part of his brain has been used for the creature.
Indeed.
Peter Henwood, the model, who I think only appeared in 2 films. And became an art dealer.
He's in London somewhere now, dealing in antiques.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, because I think he wanted the quiet life. So I wonder what he looks like now.
I wonder. Yeah. He's certainly a sculpted body in this.
Yeah, well, he was a
movie.
model. He was a model at the time.
And obviously somebody who worked out a lot.
Yeah. I think it was Tim Curry said that he bumped into Richard O'Brien in the street one day, and he said, "Oh, what are you up to?" And Richard O'Brien said, "I'm going to the gym to see if I can find a muscle man for my new musical," and that was how Tim Curry came to find out about it initially. I'm not sure where exactly they found Peter Henwood, but they were obviously looking for a muscle man. Of course, it's not his voice singing, right? The Sword of Damocles. Yeah, it's somebody else.
I did notice that, and there's one of the songs that doesn't show up on the record. We were talking before. The music production was done by Lou Adler, and the music production is just exquisite. It's so wonderful. And Tim Curry, who did go on to have a recording career, and I'm always shocked that people don't know about Tim Curry's recording career. Because he has some really terrific records. One's called Simplicity. Do you know these albums?
I've read about them.
They're so good. And there's if you go on eBay, there's a Best of Tim Curry compilation, and it's outrageously priced. I don't know how much it is, but it used to be like $400 for this CD. And I had the cassette of it, and when I was moving from San Francisco to New York, I was playing it, and of course the cassette, the tape. Got caught in there, got mangled. It was terrible, because I loved that CD, or that recording, I should say.
Oh, I'll have to look that up.
But
he's got such a good voice.
Oh my God, he's such a great singer, and he also has, the whole character that he created for Frankenfurter is this terrific blend of a Jagger styled presence.
I think Mick Jagger wanted to play the part.
Really?
Initially, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he sort of made himself known, and
wow.
I know the director Jim Sharman talks about a point in time when they had to choose between kind of well-known rock stars to cast the film or people from the original stage, and they went with the lesser-known people from the stage, and that meant they got a smaller budget. But I'm really glad.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
And so, do you know anything about the history of the play before that turned into the movie?
To some extent. So, I mean, Richard O'Brien wrote it when he was not working as an actor,
AKA
during one winter.
Riff Raff.
AKA Riff Raff. And he talks about it very casually. He just said, "Oh yeah, I just winter evenings. I just wrote it. I wrote a few songs, and it was obviously themes that were important to him. And he had a great love of the hammer horror genre, old B movies, and borrows a lot from that world. Indeed, the location, the castle, which is in England near Windsor, was a regular shoot location for hammer horror films.
I understand that there was parts of the roof that were missing when they were filming there. It was very cold and damp and uncomfortable for the actors.
Yeah, because the people who owned the building wanted to get it knocked down, but it was a listed building, so they took the lead off in the hope that it would rot and fall down, and there'd be no choice but to get rid of it and repurpose the land. But yes, when they were filming, it was rotten, but it gave it that great look, and there was no heating, and Susan Sarandon was, or Susan Sarandon, I never quite know how you say it.
That's correct.
Was complaining about how cold, and she kind of got told to pipe down, but then she got pneumonia.
Oh no!
During filming, yeah.
Oh no!
So it sounds pretty grim.
I'm curious about how the elevator. That's what really stuns me, because the elevator looks like a working elevator in that building. I don't know how they did that.
They built it it was purpose built for the film.
I see.
I forget what the inspiration was for but it was Jim. Not Jim. It was the designer's vision for it. Brian Thompson. So yeah, the lift was purpose built.
And it gives Tim Curry such a great introduction. When we were doing the sound test for the mics, you were quoting the lines.
It's my go-to karaoke song. It's one of the few songs I feel like I can get away with singing, because I don't have a great singing voice. But I love that song so much. It's such a grand.
All right, come on, give us a couple.
I knew you were going to say
give us a couple bars.
Oh gosh, here we go. I need a beat. Okay, no, I'll be fine. How do you do I? See, you've met my faithful handyman. He's just a little bored down because when you knocked, he thought you were the candy man.
Very nice.
There you go.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's
so good. I never tire of listening to that and singing along at home.
It's so much fun.
But after Richard O'Brien had written the musical, he took it to Jim Sharman, who he was working with at the time in a play, and he played the song, which is the opening song to the film, to him, Science Fiction Double Feature, which is another great song, and for film lovers, it's laden very explicitly with film references, which makes very clear his inspirations for
and
it.
The red lips. I don't know who.
Well, they
tell me who the singer is.
belong to Patricia Quinn. But it's not her voice. And I think it's actually Richard O'Brien's voice.
Wow.
I might be wrong about that, but it's her lips, because when she was asked to do the film, she said, "I'll only do it if I can sing that opening song," because she loved the song as well, and I think there was a compromise struck, which is, well, you can dub it.
Well, that's a great bit of lip syncing, because it looks perfect.
Yeah.
It really
and
looks...
it's so close up.
It's very close up, and it's so iconic. I remember the poster. I used to have the poster when I was a kid with a different set of jaws was the tagline.
I know, yeah.
Which makes no sense at all, really. Completely arcane. But does place it in American pop culture, firmly in pop culture context, which of course was where this film was headed.
Yeah.
It's such a touchstone for American pop culture and I suppose British pop culture as well.
Well, it's another reason why it made sense for me to bring this over to you from being from England.
Yeah.
The original plan for the opening sequence was to show clips from all these films that the song references, but I think budget constraints meant they couldn't do it. And actually, I'm quite glad because it's as you say, it's iconic now.
It's so iconic, and you just can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
It's so enjoyable to watch. There's something about watching this set of disembodied lips. It's so sensual, and also, like the lip syncing. It's giving you this message. It's really giving you this tone.
Yeah,
I love it. I just love it.
Yeah. Me too. So yeah, that's the song that sold it to Jim Sharman, and he got excited about it and agreed to direct it upstairs at the Royal Court, which is, even today, it's kind of an experimental space for new work. I mean, the Royal Court is known for its new writing, so it's a wonderful theatre. And it was a great success, and it ran for 7 weeks there, and then it opened in LA and somewhere in Australia as well.
And what year was this?
This was 72, and the film was released in 73. The play was 73, the film was released in 75, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And so with all this excitement, the conversations just became natural. Oh, could we make a film of this? And that was where Lou Adler got involved, and he put the money up as producer with Michael White Productions.
So Lou Adler put his money into it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you know anything about Lou Adler's history before this?
I don't.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I just know that he was a very respected producer.
Yeah. But no, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
much about his past.
Yeah.
And so they made the film, and it was not met with the great success that they were all hoping for. But I think in some respects, they're glad that it didn't initially take off, because they had to recoup the money somehow, and I think that was when it got placed at these midnight viewings, and that was where it found its home, and suddenly it evolved into not just a film that you sit and watch as we expect from films at the cinema, and people started calling back at the film and singing along, and then the props came, and it just turned into this beast, and it's never been away from the cinemas. It's still running today.
And when I first saw it in 78, I think it was, or 79, it was already, there was this text that the audience had, and so you felt that it was as though the movie had been made with this in mind. The pauses are all built in, and there's that great scene where it just repeats, where they catch each other, and Brad, Janet,
Rocky.
Yeah. And it just keeps going. It goes much longer than you think it should. I think it ends with Rocky, and then of course the audience responds with a grunt. Which is just, it's so funny, and it's so interactive.
Yeah. And there's always, when you go and see it live, there's always someone who's thought of a new one.
Right.
And they'll shout it out on their own, and then the audience will erupt into laughter, as well as all the regular ones. The one like that I remember was towards the end of the film, when Dr. Frankenfurt says, he sings it, "Whatever happened to Fay Ray?" And someone shouted, "She fucked a monkey!" And the audience just wet themselves. It was brilliant.
Oh boy, and it's funny. I always think of the De Laurentiis version with Jessica Lange, where King Kong disrobes Jessica Lange with his finger, and it happened again.
Yeah. Well, that just reminds me that the Rocky Horror Picture Show was remade quite recently, And I haven't watched it.
It's been remade? The movie's been remade?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Oh, HBO. Laverne Cox plays Frankenfurt, the well-known trans performer. And I just have no appetite to watch it because it's so special as it is to me that it can never be the same.
No, absolutely
not. And I don't know whether it's any good or not because I haven't watched it, so I can't comment. But I just don't want to contaminate it.
No, and you there's so much woven into the movie because they're using members of the original cast. There's the moment when I believe it's little Nell when she's wearing the torn pajamas and she pulls it down so that her nipple sticks out through the pajamas, and these little details that only comes from people that have worked with this material so much. And I was fascinated when I watched it just yesterday. I watched it again so that it would be fresh, and it's revealed that Frankenfurter is bisexual. So he's not just a transsexual homosexual. He's bisexual because he gets called out. Columbia calls him out because she had an affair with him.
Yeah.
And so there's all these layers of sexuality in it that at the time I'm sure were shocking for a lot of people, but really laid so much groundwork in the culture, in what we all commonly accept as in our consensual subconscious about what the LGBT movement represents.
And here is where we segue into politics, I suppose, and sexual politics.
I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very different time when it came out. It wasn't... I mean, I'm a lot more au fait with the British scene as opposed to the American, but homosexuality, for example, was still on the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, until 1973. So homosexuality was seen as a mental disorder until then. It was just a much more conservative time. Nobody was really out as being gay at that time. I think David Bowie was one of the few artists who were out. And we'd sort of been through female liberation, or at least female been through it. It had begun. And we were just at the beginnings of sexual liberation. Gay rights movements were beginning at that time, and the decriminalisation of homosexual acts between two men over 21 in private happened around that time as well. So I can imagine that it would have been incredibly shocking to some. But what it clearly was, aside from that, is liberating, and it gave people a home. And when people went to see it, they were no longer alone, and they were with like-minded people. And it serves that purpose today. It's a sort of, I mean, lots of people think of the Rocky Horror as a kind of religion. It brings together the outsiders and makes people feel at home. So it's another reason why it has stood the test of time, because it serves a purpose beyond entertaining you for an hour and a half.
Well, that theme line could not be stated any clearer at the end of the movie. Don't dream it, be it.
Be it. Yeah.
That is, it's so concise, it's so liberating, and it gives me chills to even say it because it really is just so life-affirming.
Yeah, yeah. It's always a special moment when you're seeing that live and everyone's singing it together. But it's certainly the community aspect of it that makes going to see it again and again worth it. And I generally go and see it once a year, whenever it's touring in the UK. And it's that sense of community, and no one cares what you look like. It's people talk to each other. There are no airs and graces. It's just an incredible feeling.
Well, it also, it links to the punk rock movement. And you can see in the clothes and the crazy sunglasses that all the Transylvanians wear, and also the you're talking about the mix of people. There's the Rasta guy who's one of the Transylvanians. There's a black woman with crazy hair. There's the very short woman there. So you have this melange of people who you could take a handful of those people out and say, oh, look, here's the Sex Pistols and Susie and the Banshees ready-made model right here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But so I think that the punk rock movement was in part fueled by the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And certainly when it was all happening in 77, Rocky Horror at the same time was generating this huge inertia and public awareness in London and in America. And so you could go see Rocky Horror Picture Show and see Rock and Roll High School and, of course, David Lynch's Eraserhead. They were all in the same clique, or it's not a clique, but it's the same community of ideas. It's a very idea-driven story. As much as everything is this festive, visual and oral story, there's a lot of ideas that are at play here, and I think even the beginning of the movie takes a little bit. It's set in Denton, which I think is a stand-in for Dayton, Ohio, is where it's set.
Yeah, and
so you get this oblique reference to Night of the Living Dead. There's all these strands of filmic information and cultural information that are just they're just there. And it's obviously Richard O'Brien knew what he was doing when he constructed all of these elements, all of these details.
Yeah, certainly. And he was obviously forced to confront many of these ideas because he was living them. He was struggling to conform to the male ideal, the gender stereotype of what it is to be a man. And he describes himself as being 70% male and 30% female, and he's been taking estrogen supplements, and he grew breasts, which he had when I met him a number of years ago. So that he was obviously frustrated with society and frustrated with how he didn't fit in, and his experience as an individual was not consistent with how he was taught to experience life. And that's how so many people experience the world. And that's really sad. And is why, again, Rocky Horror serves such a purpose beyond just being a film. And I can understand why Rocky Horror was made again, because it feels there is so much going on in the world of sexual politics at the moment that I guess they were trying to bring it to a younger audience and to contemporize it.
But there's so much cross-cultural and cross-generational information in it. At the time when it came out, Happy Days was a very popular television series, which was all about the 50s, and there was all this harkening back to 50s era rock and roll, which we get in Eddie's character, and it's also that style of music. And so you get this great generational link between the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and if you watch the movie now, you can see how it gets also through the 80s and the 90s and the aughts and today, because there's a timeless quality to the way that O'Brien treated the decades and the generations, so that you get these generational connections. And also because people like, the careers of people like Susan Sarandon and Tim Curry, that is also a connective tissue to it all. Because everyone's familiar with Susan Sarandon,
Yeah.
certainly. You think about a movie like The Hunger, where she has that great lesbian scene with Catherine Deneuve.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
there's, you have all of that influence that comes through. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a sort of once in a lifetime amalgamation of.
That's what I'm getting at, is that Richard O'Brien didn't need to do anything else. If he had only done this thing in his lifetime, it's a masterwork. It really is a masterwork. It's a phenomenal piece of cinematic art.
Yeah, and it's just that. I suppose it's like. In the same way that Hamilton, the musical, has become this incredible thing. It couldn't be more different from the Rocky Horror Show, of course. But it's one man's vision, and that's quite rare nowadays. There's so much creative production by committee nowadays that there's something so pure about the Rocky Horror, because it is very much Richard O'Brien's own vision, and it all came from that one brain. And obviously it was enhanced by the bringing in of the rest of the team. But there's something about the purity of one man's vision, and that's what I think of why Hamilton is so magical, because it's Lin-Manuel Miranda on his own, and he had this idea and this great passion for it, and he made it what it was.
And also, Richard O'Brien is so much fun as the hunchback Frankenstein assistant character. I love his performance. He's so deadpan.
Yeah.
And it's still so entertaining to watch Rocky Horror Picture Show and watch him and see how he's acting the part, because here's the creator in this secondary role, but a very key role, and seeing how poker faced he is about it all.
Well, that's a man with no ego. He knows himself, and he made the best use of himself, absolutely. Because it would have been very tempting and easy for him to. He probably could have done Frankenvert, but he probably knew that he wouldn't be the best man for it. And I always respect that. But yes, I mentioned that I met Richard O'Brien once. It was while I was at university, and this was Oxford University, where there's the quite well-known debating society, and I wasn't a member of the debating society because it's very expensive and I couldn't really afford it. But there was a Swedish guy in my year who had blonde hair and blue eyes, and I said, "Can I borrow your membership card so I can go in and see Richard O'Brien, who was speaking in the debating chamber?" And at the time, I was very fortunate to know the secretary of the debating society, because he was in my college, a chap called James Forsyth, who actually now lives in New York. He's a bit of a wine connoisseur now. But he was secretary at the time, and he said, "Oh, come watch the talk, and afterwards we're going to retire to this room, and we'll just have a few drinks, and Richard O'Brien will be there for a chat." So I was, beside myself with excitement at this opportunity. So I watched the talk, and he brought his guitar and he played a couple of acoustic songs from the show, which, interestingly and slightly annoyingly, most of the other students there weren't aware of Rocky Horror Show, and they were all asking questions about the Crystal Maze, which is this game show that he presented for many years in the UK. And I grew up watching it. It's an incredible adventure game show with all these physical challenges, and he did a great job of presenting it. So there were all these questions about that, and I just wanted to talk about the Rocky Horror Show. But once we were up in this room, we were sat around this enormous dining table, and he very quickly got out his bag of weed and his packet, and he said, "Right, I'm going to make a spliff. If any of you go to the press with this, I'll bloody kill you." So he rolled the spliff and passed it round, and he shared stories. And he's a quite spiritual man. He was telling a story about how he often sees these orbs floating at the end of his bed. Quite bizarre. I mean, I've never experienced that, but.
Well, I think if you smoked enough weed, you might.
Yeah, Yeah, it was. Yeah, and after 8 minutes, weed and after 8 minutes was the order of that day. So yeah, it was a nice moment.
So he picked up the guitar, and did he sing and play?
Yeah, he sung and played.
What did he play? Do you remember? Do you remember any of the songs that he played? Were any of them from Rocky Horror?
I don't remember. How can I not remember? It was. I mean, this was probably 12, 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
He definitely did play a couple of songs from the Rocky Horror Show.
Uh-huh.
My memories are slightly contaminated because I also saw him playing with David Bedella, who's an American musical theatre star based in London now, who did an incredible job of playing Frankenfurt on stage. And David Bedella hosted a sort of intimate open mic night in this little bar in London. And he invited Richard O'Brien along one evening, and they did a duet. And it was one of the most beautiful moments of my life, actually, seeing Richard O'Brien singing I'm Going Home with David Bedella, who is the second best Frankenfurt I've ever seen, behind Tim Curry.
Wow.
And that was, a tiny little underground dive bar, and there they were singing
That's
I'm Going
amazing.
Home at the end of the night. And
that
was magical, and that will stay with me. And I was there actually with a lady called Teresa, who used to be a client of mine when I worked in advertising, and she works for an amazing charity called Women's Aid, who deal in domestic abuse, but she's another lifelong Rocky Horror fan.
What's her name?
Teresa.
Uh-huh.
And we would always go to these evenings together, and I'm long gone from advertising, but we've remained firm friends as a result of Rocky Horror, and we go to hotels together and watch the Rocky Horror Show.
Wow.
So yeah, obviously I emailed her and my friend Sarah, who had told me about this, and they were very excited that I was coming here to talk about it.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, are there any other shout-outs that you want to give before we wrap up here?
Sarah and Teresa, my Rocky Horror buddies. We've talked about the Peregrine. I just recorded my first audiobook called Love and Hate in Nazi Germany, which is available on Amazon now. It's by an American author called Ryan Armstrong. Really powerful, compelling novel, which I loved reading, actually. It was very moving, and I get quite emotional reading it because it was so powerful. So that's worth a listen.
And where do you know where people can find that? Is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon.
Oh, there you go.
Love and Hate in Nazi Germany by Ryan Armstrong. So you can hear me doing my best German accent, being a Nazi. But he's a good Nazi in the best sense of being a good Nazi. He defects and falls in love with a Jewish lady.
Fantastic.
So it's a good story.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on Le Grande Bouffe to talk about this movie. Absolutely one of my top 10 films of all time, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's, I think, a timeless cultural touchstone, and I think will remain so indefinitely.
I agree, and thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all so much for listening. Please do Le Grande Bouffe, The Big Feast, a favor and pledge your support through Patreon. You can go to colesmithy.com and find a link there to pledge your support through Patreon to keep Le Grande Bouffe, The Big Feast happening every week. And as always, please remember to turn your cell phones off when you're walking, driving, riding a bicycle, or watching a movie.